And we're going to have Arvi give us a look at the stock market analysis. What a week it's been.
All right, yes, certainly quite a week. We've seen
That's right.
a very large sell-off in the market, but I think it is super important to understand that the way we have sold off is not just, hey, sell everything. It's
Okay.
it is far more selling the names that have held up the market for so long, right? Mega cap names,
Sure.
Meta, Google, whatever, all of these names just getting absolutely slaughtered on on the downside. So let's go ahead and pop over. We'll share a screen and look at the S&P 500. But it's super important to always understand, in this case, they aren't selling everything. They're just selling those names that have held up the market for so many years, right? So it's really quite interesting. So let's go ahead and hop over now to the S&P 500 weekly daily cycle analysis here. You should see that right now. So
Yep.
we'll go ahead and hop over to the weekly chart. Okay, so uh, what you're seeing here after a series on the intermediate term of higher cycle highs, higher cycle lows, bullish cycles in each of these cycles is now a shift, right? You have seen the rising mode and then the sideways chop range where we could not get over that 6100 area really. And now we have lost the 78.6 at 57.94 and then this trough right there at 56.96 has now been lost so far uh, just during this week. We'll have to see, where it closes, but uh, overall, this is now raising the odds that we would see a series of lower highs and lower lows going out into that trough, and that trough is due 421 to right around 62. On the downside, we have a zone from 5623 to 5559, and there's a level just below that from 5514 to right around 5408. So now what I want to highlight here, if we shift over to the shorter time frames, is that there is a trough that is due shortly here, right? As you can see, we are selling off very sharply. We have formed a high here when we lost that key cycle low at 6,003. And then you can see the overall shift down on the downside. And then after that, every little uptick, right, was sold quite hard. Now, if we go ahead and shift our eyes over to the left side here, you will see if we look at the weekly time frame, the intermediate term time frame, our bias shifted on 228 on the intermediate term time frame at 2:45 p.m. Eastern. Where is that? 2:28 p.m. Eastern time is here, right at right around let's say, um, uh, 59, 30-ish, 59, 40-ish, somewhere around there. That's when the intermediate term shifted. What about the short term? The short term bias shifted on 226 at 2:45 p.m. Eastern time. 226. That's here, right? So you can see how this can be helpful to help you to see shifts in bias. That shift in bias happened way up here prior to this whole move down. Okay, so what we will be now looking at is there is a trough due shortly, correct? So we will be watching for possibly a little bit lower on the downside, right? As you can see, we have our zones here, right? As I just highlighted for you. We'll be watching for a shift in the short-term bias, right? And as it is right now, it's bearish. That has to turn bullish, at least slightly bullish to have that shift in bias. And then once we see that, there would be higher odds of a move back up. But as of right now, the overall short-term bias is firmly pointed to the downside. Now let's go ahead and hop over to 2 hour. This is where it gets interesting to me, right? Look at the overall mode here. A sell mode on the downside. Everything is bearish. We're seeing bearish signals come out here, and each of these work beautifully on the downside. And you will also see a move from the overbought region into the oversold region. That is not a good sign about the overall. If we hop over back to the weekly, the overall look here on the intermediate term has shifted, and we are getting everything that is saying that the highest odds right now would be for a series of lower highs and lower lows going out into that trough. So this is just, I think, overall quite clear. Now, on the short term, we said that there is a low that is due. What I would like to see is for us to clear that low, get everyone short, right? Everyone bearish, and then create a a move like that back to the upside here. And then if that were to happen, that would be a really solid, I would say, move back to the upside here that would form. But again, we aren't there yet, but just keep that on the radar here in the S&P 500. If we pop over now to the NDX, certainly quite interesting as well. And obviously a move down here right to that same spot, right to the old low. We are trading right around it at right here. Let me just highlight that in red so you can see it. We're right at it, literally to the tick. What I want to see is, just like I said earlier, a move through that low, a pop back to the upside that then creates that final wave on the downside lower here in the S&P 5 in the NDX, sorry, just like what we said in the S&P, right? This is really the same overall picture, which is not anything uh, all that shocking. Same thing here. There's a trough that is due shortly here. We will be watching for a shift in bias. You can see on the right here, the overall short-term trading bias here is bearish ever since 226 in the NDX right there. And on the intermediate term, you can see how easy this is to use on 228, same exact time frame. So we need to see a shift in the short-term bias here. If we pop this over, uh, to slightly bullish to raise the odds that we have formed that trough. We aren't there yet, right? And every little uptick so far has been sold. If we go ahead and pop over to the short term, you can see same thing as what we just highlighted. Bearish signals coming out here. Everything is bearish and really lining up. So we have to see that shift in that 2-hour bias to slightly bullish to say that there are increased odds of now higher prices. We aren't there yet right now in the NDX. And finally, let's pop over to the RUT. RUT is where it gets interesting to me, okay? There is a trough that is due right about now. You're seeing a 1, 2, 3 down on the downside. There is a zone here from, you can see, right, this is uh, a, um, a wider zone, right? But there's a zone that where we are trading into. What I want to see now is, for just like what we just said, a shift in that short-term trading bias. If we scroll down a little bit on the short term, IWM very bearish as of 3/3 on the short term, and it was obviously it has been also on the intermediate term bearish since 221. So overall, this has been quite negative for some time, as we all know. Pop over to the short term, 221. Where is that? Right after we saw that move right there. So it was right here is where it triggered bearish. And you can see how wonderful that was here on the downside and really saying what the overall bias is. Now, there's a trough that is due shortly here as well, correct? So we'll be watching to see if we can get a shift in that short-term bias to slightly bullish. If that can happen, that would say, okay, we can then be looking for a move up. But we are not there yet, okay? We haven't seen any real signs of a low yet, and we are going to be watching for a shift here to say that it is now in play to the upside. As of right now, the overall bias is still firm down, and that is our overall look here at these charts. Okay, Matt?